When we think of leadership, our minds often turn immediately to grand strategies, bold visions, and decisive actions. We picture the leader as a figure standing atop the mountain, pointing the way forward with unwavering certainty. But if we look more closely, if we really examine what leadership looks like in the day-to-day fabric of organizational life, we see something different. Leadership is conversation. Leadership is dialogue. Leadership is the ongoing, never-ending, deeply human act of communicating intentions, hopes, fears, expectations, and dreams. It is not the ideas alone that move people. It is the way those ideas are communicated. A brilliant strategy poorly communicated will die on arrival. A mediocre idea communicated with passion, empathy, and precision can ignite a movement. Communication is not a technicality in leadership. It is the bloodstream through which all leadership flows. And yet, communication is not neutral. It does not operate in a vacuum of facts and logic. It operates within the messy, complex, beautiful world of human psychology. Every time you speak, you are speaking not to rational machines, but to emotional, biased, story-driven human beings. Every time you listen, you are not simply recording information, but interpreting, filtering, judging, feeling. This is why leadership communication must be fundamentally psychological. A leader who understands how human minds and hearts work can craft messages that land, that stick, that change behavior. A leader who ignores psychology will find themselves endlessly frustrated, wondering why clear instructions lead to confusion, why good intentions are met with resistance, why motivation fades despite rational incentives. In this course, and especially today in this first lesson, we will explore what it means to approach leadership communication not as a mechanical transmission of information, but as a psychological dance. A dance where understanding perception, emotion, memory, and bias is not optional, it is essential. Because in the end, leadership is not about what you say. It is about what they hear. And what they hear is shaped far more by psychology than by language alone. Let us now step even closer. Let us peer into the very architecture of the human mind, because it is here in the mind's hidden processes that the true battle of communication is fought. It is tempting to believe that if we speak clearly, if we articulate our ideas with precision, the listener will naturally and effortlessly receive exactly what we intended. But communication is not transmission. Communication is translation. Every human being walks through life wearing invisible glasses, glasses shaped by childhood experiences, cultural narratives, emotional wounds, education, and personal beliefs. Through these glasses, they see not the world as it is, but the world as they have learned to interpret it. These filters are powerful. They determine what we notice and what we ignore. They shape what we consider relevant, threatening, inspiring, or meaningless. When a leader speaks, their message is not absorbed passively. It is actively reconstructed within the listener's mind. If that reconstruction is close to the leader's intention, communication succeeds. If it is far from the leader's intention, communication fails no matter how eloquent the delivery was. Consider this. Two team members hear the same instruction. One feels empowered, energized, and ready to act. The other feels criticized, devalued, and retreats into disengagement. The words were the same. The emotional interpretation was entirely different. This is why leaders must approach every act of communication with radical humility. You cannot assume your words will be heard as you mean them. You must anticipate the filters through which they will pass. You must ask yourself, how might this person interpret my message? What assumptions, fears, or expectations might color their perception? And even more, you must realize that communication is not a one-way act. It is a co-creation. Meaning is built together, not delivered prepackaged. Leaders who understand this enter conversations not with rigid scripts, but with living awareness, adjusting, clarifying, and sensing, moment by moment, how their message is being received, processed, and felt. In truth, you are never just speaking to a person. You are speaking to a history, a psychology, a story. Communication that changes hearts and moves organizations honors that complexity rather than ignoring it. If we accept that communication is filtered through the unique lenses of each individual, we must also recognize that these lenses are not neutral or purely rational. They are profoundly shaped by cognitive biases, systematic errors in thinking that affect the judgments and decisions we make. For a leader, understanding these biases is not merely academic, it is practical. It is essential. Because every word you speak must navigate a mental landscape filled with distortions you did not create, but must nonetheless contend with. Consider the confirmation bias. It is perhaps the most powerful and insidious of all. People do not seek information objectively. They seek information that confirms what they already believe. When a leader presents a new strategy, a new vision, a new critique, listeners are not asking, is this true? They are asking, often unconsciously, does this fit with what I already believe? If it does, it will be accepted, perhaps even embraced. If it does not, it will often be resisted, questioned, or outright rejected, not on logical grounds, but on emotional and psychological grounds, or reflect on the fundamental attribution error. We are, as humans, prone to attribute the failures of others to flaws in their character. They are lazy, careless, stubborn, while attributing our own failures to circumstances beyond our control. This bias poisons communication within teams. When mistakes happen without an understanding of this bias, leaders may judge too harshly, team members may defend too fiercely, and the real causes of problems remain hidden under layers of blame and misunderstanding. And let us not forget the halo effect, where the first impression someone forms about you, often within seconds, colors all future perceptions. A leader who projects confidence, warmth, and competence in the first meeting finds that their future communications are interpreted more favorably. A leader who appears uncertain, cold, or distracted faces an uphill battle, no matter how wise or brilliant their later contributions may be. These biases are not exceptions. They are the rule. They are woven into the fabric of human cognition, and ignoring them is like sailing a ship while pretending the winds and currents do not exist. You may be a brilliant navigator, but if you refuse to account for the invisible forces shaping your course, you will be constantly thrown off track. The wise leader does not fight cognitive biases with frustration. The wise leader accepts them as part of the terrain. They learn to anticipate them. They communicate in ways that reduce resistance rather than inflaming it. They ask questions that gently challenge assumptions rather than bulldozing them. They create environments where it is safe to update beliefs rather than defend them. If you wish to lead minds, you must first understand minds, not as they should be, but as they truly are, biased, emotional, deeply human. Now we must go even deeper, beneath the layers of cognition, into the very heart of human interaction, the emotional brain. For all our modern pride in rationality and logic, neuroscience tells us a humbling truth. We are emotional beings first, rational beings second. Every conversation, every leadership message, every interaction passes first through the emotional centers of the brain before it ever reaches the rational cortex. And this order of operations matters profoundly. Imagine you are addressing your team about a major organizational change. You lay out the strategic reasons, the data, the projections, all flawlessly logical. But if your message triggers fear, uncertainty, or resentment, it does not matter how brilliant your logic is. The emotional brain has already decided. This is dangerous. This is threatening. This must be resisted. No spreadsheet, no PowerPoint slide, no detailed rationale can override an emotional reaction that has already taken root. The emotional brain operates much faster than the rational brain. It makes judgments in milliseconds. It detects threat or safety before we have consciously processed a single word. This is why so often we feel a conversation going badly even before we can articulate why. It is why people say things like, I just have a bad feeling about this, or something doesn't sit right with me, even when no overt conflict has occurred. For leaders, this reality imposes a sacred responsibility. Before you can change minds, you must touch hearts. Before you can ask for action, you must create emotional safety. Emotional safety is not a soft, sentimental concept. It is the neurobiological prerequisite for openness, collaboration, and innovation. When people feel safe, their brains open up, literally making new connections, embracing new ideas, and engaging in creative problem solving. When they feel unsafe, their brains shut down into defensive, protective postures, fight, flight, or freeze. This means that leadership communication must be designed first and foremost with emotional intelligence. The tone of voice, the body language, the timing, the context, all these nonverbal factors matter often more than the content itself. A leader must ask, Am I creating a space where people feel seen, heard, and respected? Am I calming the nervous system before I appeal to the mind? Words carry emotional weight. Silence carries emotional weight. Even a glance, a nod, a pause, all of these signal to the emotional brain either welcome or warning. And the emotional brain remembers. Long after facts are forgotten, the emotional imprint remains. If you wish to be a leader whose words are trusted, whose visions are embraced, whose corrections are received with grace rather than resistance, you must master the art of emotional communication. You must understand that every conversation begins not with words, but with feelings, and feelings, once set in motion, create the pathways along which thoughts will travel. Now that we understand how profoundly emotions shape communication, we must confront one of the most powerful and perhaps humbling truths about leadership. As a leader, you are a mirror. Not a passive mirror, but an active, amplifying mirror. The emotional state you carry into the room will not stay contained within you. It will ripple outward. It will infect the emotional climate of your team, your organization, your entire environment, whether you are aware of it or not. Think for a moment about leaders you have known or worked under. Some radiate calm in the midst of chaos. Their very presence steadies others, lowers anxiety, restores focus. Others radiate tension, fear, or anger. Even when they say all the right words, the room tightens, energy drains, creativity suffocates. The difference lies not primarily in their rhetoric, but in their inner emotional state, a state that leaks out into every gesture, every tone, every silent pause. Human beings are exquisitely sensitive to emotional cues. Long before we consciously process what someone says, we intuitively pick up how they feel. Tiny micro-expressions, subtle shifts in vocal pitch, almost invisible body language. These are the true conveyors of emotional information, and they are contagious. Emotional contagion is not metaphorical, it is biological. Mirror neurons in the brain literally cause us to synchronize emotionally with those around us, especially those in positions of authority. This is why emotional self-awareness is not merely a nice bonus skill for leaders. It is an absolute necessity. If you are unaware of your own internal emotional state, you will transmit emotions you do not intend. You may be radiating anxiety while speaking words of confidence. You may be emanating irritation while professing collaboration. Your team will pick up on the dissonance instinctively, even if they cannot articulate it. Trust will erode. Engagement will weaken. True leadership begins with self-mastery. Before you manage others, you must manage yourself. Before you seek to inspire, you must be in touch with your own emotional landscape. What am I feeling right now? What emotional tone am I projecting into this space? Am I leading from fear or from clarity? From frustration or from compassion? One of the most powerful leadership disciplines is emotional preparation before key conversations. Not just preparing your arguments, but preparing your inner state, centering yourself, grounding yourself, aligning your emotions with your intentions. Because no matter what your mouth says, your body and your energy will tell the truth. You are a psychological mirror. Your team will reflect not just your strategies, but your spirit. Not just your instructions, but your energy. The emotional atmosphere you carry with you will become the emotional atmosphere of your organization. This is not a burden. It is a profound opportunity. To lead others well, lead yourself first. To communicate transformation, embody it. Even when we understand the emotional nature of communication, even when we approach our teams with clarity, empathy, and intention, we must still navigate a minefield of psychological barriers that distort, block, or disrupt the flow of true understanding. These barriers are not signs of failure. They are inherent features of human interaction. To be an effective leader, you must not only anticipate them, but develop strategies to work through them with patience, wisdom, and grace. One of the most pervasive barriers is the fear of judgment. It operates on both sides of the leadership equation. Leaders may hold back from communicating difficult truths out of fear of being seen as harsh, weak, or incompetent. They may soften messages that need to be firm or avoid conversations that need to be had because deep down they fear rejection. Meanwhile, team members often censor themselves for the same reasons. They avoid voicing dissent, raising concerns, or admitting mistakes because they fear being judged, marginalized, or punished. Where fear of judgment reigns, authenticity dies. Conversations become strategic performances rather than genuine exchanges. Problems fester in silence. Creativity withers under the weight of unspoken anxieties. A leader must recognize this fear and work relentlessly to dismantle it by modeling vulnerability, rewarding honesty, and creating spaces where it is not just safe, but expected to speak the full truth. Another common barrier is the misinterpretation of intentions. In the absence of perfect information, the human mind fills in the gaps, often with suspicion rather than trust. A directive intended to support may be perceived as micromanagement. A question intended to invite dialogue may be perceived as a hidden criticism. A silence intended as space for reflection may be perceived as disapproval. Misinterpretations thrive in ambiguity, and they corrode trust at an astonishing speed. Leaders must therefore over-communicate intentions, not just actions. I am asking this because I want to understand your perspective. I am giving this feedback because I believe in your potential. I am taking the moment of silence because I want to give your ideas the space they deserve. When you narrate your intentions transparently, you leave less room for the mind's dark stories to take root. And then there is the distortion created by hierarchy itself, what we might call the boss effect. The moment you hold positional power, your words, your silences, even your smallest gestures are magnified far beyond what you intend. A casual comment can feel like a decree. A passing frown can send waves of anxiety through a team. People will often tell you what they think you want to hear rather than what you need to hear. They will mask problems to protect themselves. They will conceal doubts out of fear of appearing disloyal. If you are not consciously counteracting the distortions of hierarchy, you are being distorted by them. Wise leaders actively solicit dissent. They reward truth-telling. They thank those who point out flaws rather than punishing them. They build cultures where the highest loyalty is not obedience, but honesty. Psychological barriers in communication are not signs of dysfunction. They are signs of humanity. They are inevitable, but they are not insurmountable. Awareness is the first key. Courage is the second. And consistent, intentional practice is the third. To communicate with real power as a leader, you must learn to recognize these barriers not as enemies, but as the very terrain you are called to navigate. Communication is not easy. It is not automatic. It is a craft worthy of your deepest attention and your most skillful artistry. As we bring this first lesson to a close, I want to invite you to step back and see the larger landscape we have uncovered together. Leadership communication is not, and never has been, a simple matter of transferring information from one mind to another. It is a psychological, emotional, profoundly human process. To lead others, you must first lead conversations. And to lead conversations, you must understand not just words, but minds. The first great truth we uncovered is that perception is subjective. Every person you lead sees the world not as it is, but as they are. Their experiences, their memories, their emotions, their biases all filter your message before it ever reaches their conscious understanding. Knowing this, you must approach communication with humility, patience, and a deep respect for the inner worlds of others. The second great truth is that human communication is riddled with biases and distortions. Confirmation bias, attribution error, halo effects, these are not rare accidents. They are the air we breathe. Ignorance of these forces blinds you. Awareness of them empowers you. As a leader, you must become a master navigator of the unseen currents that guide human thought and feeling. The third great truth is that emotions govern conversations far more than logic does. Emotional safety is not a luxury in leadership communication, it is the foundation. If you do not make people feel safe, seen, and valued, no amount of rational argument will move them. If you do, even difficult messages can be heard, considered, and embraced. The fourth great truth is that you, as a leader, are a psychological mirror. You do not merely communicate content, you communicate presence. Your emotional state, your inner clarity, your unspoken energy, these shape your team's emotional atmosphere more powerfully than any official policy or motivational speech ever could. To lead others emotionally, you must first lead yourself emotionally. And finally, we have seen that psychological barriers are not enemies to be conquered, but realities to be understood. Fear of judgment, misinterpretations of intent, distortions of hierarchy, these are the natural obstacles in the terrain of human interaction. The leader who ignores them stumbles blindly. The leader who understands them walks with eyes wide open. What does all of this mean for you? practically as you move forward. It means that every conversation is an opportunity to build or erode trust. It means that every message you craft must be designed for the mind and the heart. It means that before you speak, you must listen, not just to words, but to emotional currents. It means that the work of leadership communication begins not with perfect phrasing, but with inner mastery. You're not just a speaker of words. You are a shaper of perceptions. You are an architect of emotional reality. You are a guide for minds and hearts in a complex and uncertain world. Embrace this calling with reverence, with courage, and with relentless practice. Because when you master the psychology of communication, you do not merely move teams. You move destinies. And that is true leadership.